For 1,000 years, the galaxy prepared for a single war. Not a rebellion, not a border conflict, not even a civilizational collapse. This was something else. This was Earth. Across the Galactic Dominion's archives, one entry remained unchanged for centuries, an anomaly among endless conquest records. Planet designation Earth. Classification Death World Extreme. Survival probability 0.0001%. Directive Do not engage. Most species obeyed such warnings without question. Entire star systems had been abandoned for far less, but the Dominion did not rise to power by avoiding danger. It rose by erasing it. Earth was the last unclaimed world in their expanding empire. A small, unremarkable planet orbiting an average star. On the surface, it made no sense. No rare resources, no strategic position, no advanced galactic infrastructure. And yet it had resisted, not with fleets, not with superior technology, but with something far more irritating. Refusal. Humanity had rejected every Dominion attempt at contact. Every envoy vanished. Every probe was lost. Every long-range scan returned incomplete or corrupted data. To the Dominion, that wasn't defiance. It was an insult. So they studied. For centuries, they watched from the dark edges of the system. They mapped Earth's ecosystems in obsessive detail, cataloged every predator, every virus, every environmental threat. They analyzed storms powerful enough to swallow continents, oceans deep enough to crush warships, creatures that could kill with tooth, venom, or sheer size. They measured gravity levels higher than most habitable worlds, enough to cripple standard infantry. Earth wasn't just hostile, it was excessive. Then they studied the humans. That part was easier. Humanity broadcast everything. Wars, politics, entertainment, chaos. The Dominion collected centuries of human conflict data. They dissected strategies, battle formations, weapon designs. They watched humans fight each other with relentless creativity and concluded something simple. Humans were self-destructive, primitive, emotional, unstable. Divide them, and they fall. The Dominion's War Council concluded. Strike fast, strike precisely, and they will collapse. So the Dominion prepared. For 1,000 years, they engineered the perfect invasion. They created armor resistant to Earth's toxic atmosphere and biological hazards. They bred war beasts capable of surviving radiation, extreme pressure, and brutal terrain. They trained entire generations of soldiers under simulated Earth conditions. Gravity increased, oxygen altered, environments designed to break weaker species. They built ships capable of piercing through violent atmospheric storms without losing stability. Nothing was left to chance. Nothing was left unaccounted for. And when they were ready, they didn't announce their arrival. They descended. The sky above Earth fractured. Without warning, without signal, space itself seemed to tear open as thousands of Dominion warships emerged from hyperspace. They didn't scatter. They didn't hesitate. They formed a perfect grid across the planet's upper atmosphere, blotting out sunlight like a second nightfall. Cities froze. Millions looked up. And for the first time in human history, humanity saw something it had never truly believed would come. The invasion began in silence. No speeches. No threats. Just precision. Orbital weapons activated instantly. Thin beams of concentrated energy lanced down from orbit, striking key military installations across continents within seconds. Airbases vanished. Command centers collapsed. Defense satellites were erased before they could respond. The Dominion had studied human warfare. They knew exactly where to strike. Within 60 seconds, every major military power on Earth had been crippled. Panic spread faster than any signal. Global communication networks fractured. Governments struggled to respond as chaos erupted in streets, cities, entire nations. People ran. People screamed. People waited for something to happen. But nothing came. No counterattack. No retaliation. No visible defense. From orbit, Dominion Commander Zyrell observed the unfolding situation with cold satisfaction. Phase 1 complete. One of his officers reported. Minimal resistance. Zyrell narrowed his eyes. Minimal or none? There was a difference. And he felt it. Because something was wrong. The humans were not fighting. For a species that had spent centuries in constant conflict, their silence was unnatural. There were no emergency broadcasts calling for resistance, no coordinated evacuation patterns, no desperate last stands, just stillness. Scan for underground facilities, Zyrel ordered. Find their command structures. Yes, Commander. But the scans came back incomplete, distorted, as if something beneath the surface was interfering. Deep beneath Earth's crust, far below any known human military installation, something ancient hummed quietly. In a reinforced underground chamber, shielded by layers of technology, far beyond anything visible on the surface, a group of individuals stood calmly before a central console. There was no panic here, no confusion, only focus. At the center stood General Armin Ver. His expression was steady, almost patient, as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. A young officer approached him, voice tight with restrained tension. Sir, orbital strikes confirmed across all major zones. Ver nodded once. Casualties. Minimal so far. That wasn't luck. That was planning. Another screen lit up. A single message blinked across the display. Contact confirmed. The room fell silent. Ver stepped forward, studying the message. For a brief moment, something unreadable passed through his eyes. Relief. Anticipation. Maybe even satisfaction. They came, he said quietly. The officer hesitated. Sir, do we initiate Phase 0? Ver looked up, not at the screen, not at his team, but as if he could see through layers of rock, through the chaos above, all the way to the invading fleet. They spent 1,000 years preparing for this war, he said. A faint, almost pitying smile appeared. We've been ready longer. He reached out and pressed a single button. Above Earth, the sky remained silent for one more second. Then everything changed. The Dominion expected resistance. They expected panic, chaos, desperate retaliation. They expected humanity to fight. They did not expect silence. The first wave of Dominion ground forces descended through Earth's atmosphere in flawless formation. Dropships burned through the sky like falling stars, stabilizing just before impact, deploying legions of armored soldiers onto cities that should have been alive with resistance. Instead, they found emptiness. No armies, no barricades, no counter-fire. Streets were abandoned, vehicles left mid-motion. Entire districts stood frozen in time, as if humanity had simply stepped away. Dominion Commander Zyrel watched from orbit, unease creeping into his thoughts. Report, he demanded. Ground forces deployed successfully. An officer replied. No organized resistance detected. Zyrel's gaze hardened. No resistance, he repeated. That is correct, Commander. The population appears to have vanished. That wasn't possible. Not at this scale. Not this quickly. Thermal scans, Zyrel ordered. Life signs. A pause. Then, inconsistent. Inconsistent. Zyrel snapped. Readings are fluctuating. Signals are appearing and disappearing across multiple regions. We cannot establish stable tracking. Something cold settled in Zyrel's chest. Maintain orbital dominance, he said. Prepare Phase 2. But before the order could be executed, every screen on the bridge flickered. Once, twice, then went black. Across the entire Dominion fleet, systems failed simultaneously. Navigation grids collapsed. Targeting arrays shut down. Communications dissolved into static. Panic erupted. Commander, we've lost signal across all channels. Backup systems unresponsive. Navigation is. Silence. Zyrel roared. His claws dug into the command console as he forced himself to think. This was impossible. Every system had redundancies. Every protocol accounted for failure. A total blackout across thousands of ships should not exist. And yet, it did. For 3 seconds, the Dominion fleet drifted blind. Then the sky changed. At first, it was subtle. A distortion, like heat-bending light, rippling across the upper atmosphere. Then it spread. Reality itself seemed to twist. The stars warped. Space folded inward, as if something massive was pressing against the fabric of existence from the other side. What is that? One officer whispered. No one answered, because no one had ever seen anything like it. From the distortion, shapes began to emerge. Not ships, not weapons, something else. Massive black structures appeared in orbit, silent and unmoving. They had no visible engines, no weapon ports, no identifiable design. They simply existed. Commander Zyrell felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. Scan them, he ordered, voice tight. No response, came the reply. Sensors cannot identify composition. Energy readings are undefined. Undefined. That word did not belong in Dominion reports. Below, deep beneath Earth's surface, General Vare watched the same scene unfold across a controlled display. They're reacting, one of his officers said quietly. Of course they are, Vare replied. His voice was calm, measured, as if everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Do we engage fully, sir? Another officer asked. Vare shook his head. No. A pause. Just enough. He gestured toward the display. Let them understand. Above, one of the black structures moved. It didn't accelerate. It didn't fire. It didn't even appear to move in a conventional sense. It simply shifted, and a Dominion warship disappeared. There was no explosion, no debris, no energy spike. One moment it existed. The next, it didn't. Report. Zyrell shouted. Ship gone, Commander. Destroyed. No. The officer hesitated, voice shaking. Not destroyed, it's just gone. Before Zyrell could respond, another ship vanished. Then another. Then 5. Then 10. Panic spread across the fleet like fire. Evasive maneuvers. Retreat formation. Re-establish control. But it didn't matter. The black structures continued their silent advance. Each movement erased another ship. No pattern. No delay. No defense. Within seconds, entire sections of the Dominion fleet ceased to exist. Zyrell staggered back, disbelief crashing into him. This is impossible, he whispered. They had prepared for every scenario, every weapon, every strategy, every form of resistance humanity could offer. But this wasn't resistance. This was something else entirely. Below, General Vare watched the fleet unravel. They thought Earth was dangerous because of its storms, he said quietly. An officer glanced at him. Sir, Vare's eyes never left the screen. They thought it was the gravity, the predators, the environment. Another ship vanished. They were wrong. The room was silent now. Every person watching understood, even if they didn't fully comprehend. This wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. Vare leaned slightly forward. They prepared for 1,000 years to fight humans, he said. His voice dropped, cold and certain. They never prepared for what we found. Above Earth, the Dominion fleet continued to disappear. One ship at a time, 1 second at a time, until the realization finally spread across every surviving mind. This war had already been decided. Panic became something worse. Not fear, not chaos. Realization. Commander Zyrell stood frozen on the bridge of his flagship, claws digging into the metal beneath him as another warship vanished from existence. No explosion, no warning, no trace. This is impossible, he whispered again, but this time, no one answered, because every officer on the bridge already knew the truth. This wasn't a malfunction. This wasn't a weapon they could counter. This was something they had never even imagined. We accounted for everything, one of the strategists said, voice trembling. Every known human weapon, every theoretical advancement, Not everything, Zyrell interrupted. His eyes slowly lifted toward the black structures drifting through space. Silent, watching, waiting. We accounted for humans, he said. A pause, but not for what they were hiding. Deep beneath Earth's surface, the air inside the command chamber felt heavier now. Not with fear, but with truth. General Armin Vare stood before a display that no Dominion sensor could ever reach. Not because it was hidden, but because it was protected. Begin historical playback, he ordered. The room darkened. A projection came alive. Not of Earth as it was, but of Earth before. Approximately 12,000 years ago. Vare began, his voice calm, almost clinical. Long before modern civilization, something arrived on this planet. The projection showed the sky tearing open, just like it had moments ago during the invasion. But what came through was not a fleet. It was one thing. Massive. Shapeless. Wrong. It didn't land. Ver continued. It didn't crash. It was contained. The image shifted. Mountains rose. Oceans formed. Continents settled. But at the center of it all, something remained buried. Earth was never just a planet, Ver said. One officer swallowed hard. Sir, you're saying? Ver nodded once. It's a vault. Silence. Not metaphorical. Not theoretical. A literal, planetary-scale prison. Above, Zyrel's fleet continued to fall apart. Commander, we're losing formation. 70% of the fleet has. Say it, Zyrel demanded. The officer's voice broke. Gone. Zyrel's breathing slowed. Not in calm, but in surrender. Open a channel, he said. Commander. Now. The channel opened. Static filled the bridge. Then, a voice. Human. Come. This is Earth Command. Zyrel forced himself to stand tall. To whoever is responsible for this, identify your weapon. A pause. Then the answer came. It's not a weapon. The words hit harder than any blast. Then what is it? Zyrel demanded. Below, Ver answered. It's a lock. The black structures shifted again. Closer now. Not attacking. Observing. You see. Ver continued, his voice echoing through the transmission. Whatever arrived here all those thousands of years ago, it couldn't be destroyed. Another Dominion ship vanished. So it was contained. Zyrel's voice dropped to a whisper. And you control it? For the first time, Ver hesitated. Just slightly. Control, he repeated. A faint, almost humorless breath followed. No. The room on Earth fell silent again, because every human in that chamber knew the truth behind that answer. They didn't control it. They never had. We learned how to interact with it. Ver said carefully. Communicate. Influence. Another ship vanished. Convince it. Zyrel's vision blurred as the realization crashed into him. You didn't build this. No, Ver said. His eyes locked onto the screen. We inherited it. The projection behind him changed again, showing something new. Humans. Early humans. Standing near something impossible. Something buried. Something alive. And over time, Ver continued, it learned us. Above, the black structures began to move in perfect synchronization. The fleet was nearly gone now. And yet, they were slowing. Not accelerating. Not finishing the job. They're stopping, one Dominion officer whispered. Zyrel looked up. Why, he asked. The answer came immediately. From Earth. Because we told it to. Silence. Heavy. Final. Zyrel's voice trembled. What are you? General Ver leaned closer to the microphone. And for the first time, there was no calm in his voice. Only truth. We're the species, he said quietly, that made peace with the thing your entire empire was built to fear. Above Earth, the last of the Dominion fleet drifted, broken, incomplete, alive only because something far worse had decided to stop. And in that moment, Commander Zyrel understood. This wasn't a war. It never had been. It was a warning. 7 minutes. That was all it took. 7 minutes to erase 1,000 years of planning. 7 minutes to break the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever known. 7 minutes to prove that Earth was never meant to be conquered. The Dominion fleet, once flawless, unstoppable, eternal, was now a shattered remnant drifting in silent orbit. Where there had been thousands of warships, there were now only fragments of formation, scattered survivors, broken command structures. Commander Zyrel stood motionless on the bridge, not out of discipline, not out of strength, but because there was nothing left to command. Status, he said, though the word felt meaningless. A trembling officer responded. 83% of the fleet gone. Gone. Not destroyed. Not defeated. Erased. Another voice joined in, quieter. Remaining vessels are attempting retreat. Navigation systems are partially restored. But what? Zyrel asked. They're not stopping it. Zyrel's eyes slowly lifted. The black structures still surrounded them. Silent. Watching. Waiting. But they had stopped advancing. They weren't finishing the job. They were allowing it. Escape. The realization hit harder than any weapon. "They're letting us go," Zyrel whispered. Deep beneath Earth's surface, the command chamber remained perfectly still. No cheers, no celebration, only control. General Armand Vere stood with his hands behind his back, watching the Dominion fleet fracture and scatter. "Retreat confirmed across all enemy vessels," an officer reported. Vere nodded once. "Maintain observation." A younger officer hesitated before speaking. "Sir, we could end this." The room went silent. Every eye turned to the general. "Finish them," the officer continued, voice tightening. "Ensure they never come back." It was a logical suggestion, a strategic one, and completely wrong. Vere turned slowly, his gaze settling on the officer. "For 1,000 years," he said calmly, "they prepared to destroy us." A pause. "And in 7 minutes, we proved they never had a chance." He stepped closer. "If we erase them completely." His voice dropped, colder now. "They learned nothing." Above Earth, the remaining Dominion ships began to flee. Not in formation, not with coordination, but in desperation. Ships collided trying to escape orbital lanes. Others activated unstable jump drives, vanishing blindly into deep space. There were no commands, no leadership, only survival. On the flagship, Zyrel gripped the console as alarms screamed around him. "Emergency jump ready," an officer shouted. "Coordinates unstable. We may not survive the transit." Zyrel didn't hesitate. "Do it." The stars outside twisted violently as the ship prepared to tear itself out of orbit. But just before the jump, Zyrel looked back. At Earth. At the black structures, still hovering in silence. Watching. Waiting. "They could have destroyed us all," he said softly. No one answered, because they all knew. They chose not to. The jump activated, and the last Dominion flagship vanished. Silence returned to Earth's orbit. The black structures remained for a moment longer. Then, they faded. Not moving, not leaving, simply no longer there. Reality settled. The sky cleared. Sunlight returned, as if the war had never happened. But it had, and every survivor would remember it. In the command chamber, the tension finally broke. One officer exhaled sharply. Another leaned against a console, hands shaking, not from fear, but from the release of it. "Deactivation complete," someone reported quietly. General Vere nodded. "Stand down all systems." A pause. Then the same young officer spoke again, more carefully this time. "Sir, what if they come back?" Vere didn't answer immediately. He turned back to the display, to Earth, to the silence above it. Then he spoke. "They will." The room stiffened. "But next time," Vere continued, his voice calm, certain, "they won't come as conquerors." He looked at the officer. "They'll come remembering what happened here." Far beyond Earth's system, scattered across broken hyperspace routes, Dominion survivors emerged, damaged, disoriented, changed. Entire fleets reduced to whispers of existence. Command structures shattered, confidence gone. But one thing remained: memory. Of ships vanishing without a trace. Of power beyond comprehension. Of a planet that didn't fight, because it didn't need to. And of a choice. A single, terrifying choice. Humanity could have ended them, but didn't. That was the part they would never forget, because destruction was expected. But mercy? Mercy meant something far worse. It meant humanity had nothing to prove. The galaxy did not sleep. Not after Earth. News didn't spread. It exploded. Fragments of Dominion ships limped back across known space, broadcasting broken transmissions before collapsing into silence. Entire fleets were missing. Command chains had vanished. Survivors spoke in fragments, disconnected, trembling, incomplete. They didn't fire. They didn't attack. They just removed us. At first, the Galactic Council dismissed it. Panic, shock, failure dressed as myth. But then the data came. Sensor logs recovered from shattered vessels. Visual fragments stitched together from dying ships. Telemetry that simply stopped mid-transmission. Entire warships vanishing between one frame and the next. No energy spike. No radiation. No debris. Nothing. That was what terrified the most. Not destruction. Absence. In the central chamber of the Galactic Council, silence ruled. Dozens of species stood frozen around a massive projection. At its center, Earth, a small blue world, unchanged, unscarred, untouchable. This is impossible, one counselor whispered. Another shook their head slowly. We marked it a death world for environmental instability. A third voice cut in, trembling. We were wrong. The projection shifted. Recovered footage played. Dominion warships drifting. Then, gone. A ripple across space. Black shapes forming. Watching. Waiting. Judging. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as a new signal forced its way through the Council's communication grid. Unauthorized. Untraceable. Unstoppable. The projection flickered. Then changed. The image of Earth remained. But now, there was a voice. Calm. Clear. Human. This is Earth. No introduction. No title. No demand for attention. And yet, every being in the chamber leaned forward, because something in that voice did not ask to be heard. It expected it. We are aware of your observation. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. They had hidden their surveillance, encrypted their signals, masked their probes. It hadn't mattered. You have seen what happened. A pause. No anger. No pride. Just fact. For 1,000 years, the Dominion prepared to destroy us. The footage shifted again. Dominion fleets assembling, weapons charging, armies descending. Then, gone. We ended that war in 7 minutes. A quiet ripple moved through the chamber. 7 minutes. The number carried weight now, not as time, but as proof. The voice continued. We did not respond with force. Another pause. We responded with restraint. That word hit harder than anything else. Restraint. Because every being in that room understood what it meant. Earth had held back. We are not your enemy. The words echoed through the chamber. Simple. Clear. Terrifying. But we are not your conquest. The projection zoomed slowly toward Earth. Closer. Closer. As if inviting them to look deeper. To those who seek war. The voice softened slightly. Understand this. The image flickered. For a fraction of a second, something else appeared. Not Earth. Something beneath it. Something vast. Something watching. The image snapped back instantly. Too fast for analysis. Too fast for certainty. But not too fast to feel. We did not build what protects us. The chamber froze. We learned to live with it. Silence. Heavy. Unbreakable. And it learned us. Several counselors recoiled instinctively, because that sentence carried something deeper than threat. It carried implication. Earth was not just protected. It was understood. If you come to us in peace. The voice steadied. You will find peace. A pause. The final pause. But if you come as the Dominion did. The lights in the chamber flickered. Not from failure. From something else. Something watching back. The final words came. Calm. Certain. Absolute. We won't stop at 7. The transmission ended. No signal trace. No origin point. No way to respond. Just silence. Across the galaxy. No one spoke. No one moved. No one dared to break what had just settled over them. Because for the first time in recorded history, humanity wasn't underestimated. It wasn't dismissed. It wasn't studied as a curiosity. It was understood. Not as prey. Not as rival. But as something far more dangerous. A species that did not need to prove its power. Because it had already chosen not to use it. And somewhere, deep beneath Earth, something ancient watched the stars and waited.